This session provides general information only and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It is not personal advice. Views expressed may not reflect NetWealth's, and NetWealth may receive fees for products discussed. Please seek professional advice before acting.
I think we can probably do a little bit of work as advisors and advice firms to just sort of simplify things and take a step back, unpack it all.
You have these family office principals. Every generation, eventually, the principal changes.
The operations role is much more tactical as opposed to somebody who can handle and ensure really the execution of the firm's growth strategy.
And literally, I've gone deep into some pretty technical subjects, and hopefully in a way that enables people to not only grasp them, but can say, how can I apply this for my individual situation?
Hi, and welcome to Between Meetings with Matt Heiner. In this podcast series, NetWealth CEO and Managing Director chats to industry leaders and innovators with local and global expertise. They discuss the latest technologies, business models, and demographic changes, as well as leadership lessons and trends that are impacting financial services. We hope you enjoy their unique insights.
Welcome to this episode of Between Meetings. Today we've got Pete Matthew joining us from the UK very early in the morning. Thanks for joining us, Pete.
No worries, Matt. Great to be here. Thank you for having me. This is definitely the earliest I've ever recorded, so let's hope it's all right.
I'm sure you will be good. As we progress through this podcast, people will understand why I'm very comfortable just to let you go. We came across you, or a group of people met with you almost a month ago now as part of the NetWealth study tour. I unfortunately wasn't on that trip, but have had fantastic feedback, which is why the team was really keen to get us on the pod together. Before we start, it'd be great just to hear about you and a bit of your history.
I am 51 years old, married nearly 30 years to Joanne. I've got two grown-up girls, Ellie, who's 26, and Kate, who's 23. I live in the very far southwest of the UK in Cornwall. So the town is called Penzance, subject of a famous Gilbert and Sullivan, Pirates of Penzance. So like right in the sticks, surrounded by the sea. If you're going to live in the UK, man, it's the best place to live, right?
I've got a cousin actually from Cornwall. So he was a surfer.
So you know.
Yeah, he's a surfer down there, which I always thought was amusing given how cold it must be.
Yeah, the water's cold, but the surf is good, certainly in some of the beaches. And I'm from the north of England, but married a Cornish girl, so my fate was sealed, really. So I've been a financial planner for 28 years now, went through the sort of traditional career path, working for a couple of insurance companies, then became independent, moved to Cornwall in 2002. Joe and I met at university and was fortunate to be asked to buy into my company, which is called Jackson's, back in 2007. So for many years, I have co-owned a practice and I've retired off several of my colleagues. Now it's sort of 350 million under management, 26 people, 8 advisors. And we're having great fun. And we like to think we're doing things somewhat differently, which I'm sure we'll get to. So we run a 4-day week, for example, pay our staff for 5 days and we only work for 4. So we'll talk about that, I'm sure, later on. But also, as a weird little sideline, in 2010, I started messing around with a video camera, creating YouTube videos when nobody was watching YouTube videos back then. And that has become a bit of a monster. It's a business in its own right. It sends 90% of the business to my practice. And it's really interesting, challenging work that we get. So my life has taken a turn that perhaps I couldn't have seen sort of 20 years ago when I first joined the company. We're having a ball, man, and very excited about the future.
Before we get into maybe a little bit more about your business and in particular what you're doing with the video camera and with the podcast, one of the comments that we got back from our recent study tour was it was almost like seeing, or the UK wealth industry was almost like looking into the future, and the direction that was heading is really where we're going to be probably in the next 5 years. So I'd love just also just get a bit of a litmus test on how you think the industry is faring over there and what the last 3 or 4 years have been like as you, I guess, transitioned out of RDR.
Yeah, like RDR is now like 13 years ago, which is incredible. I read the very first discussion paper by the then regulator, the FSA, and I figured this was going to be big, right? My colleagues who were considerably older than me, they were like, nah, that'll never come in. And it was all about, raising the minimum level of qualification, abolishing commission on investment and pension products. It's still there for insurance. And just basically raising the bar. And we just knew it would kind of cut out a lot of Let's just ask. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes, you may.
Say
in a thick accent.
Yeah, right. Cut out a lot of the shit from the industry, basically, right? Just get rid of the people who are playing at it, the commission-hungry salespeople, and hopefully it would kind of distill the industry a little bit into a more quality, to kind of raise the bar up somewhere near towards law and accountancy. The professions are much more respected. Jury's out as to whether it's fully achieved that, but I think it was the biggest step. So, I mean, the last few years, I think, have been the inexorable push towards proper financial planning. I think there's still not enough of that going on. I think too many people pay lip service to it. It's just in the pursuit of assets under management, which is fine, but I think there's not enough real financial planning going on still. Just my not so humble opinion. Lots of mergers and acquisitions. And I'm at the age now where a lot of my mates are selling. People who I've known for 20 odd years now, selling, and, all power to them. I've yet to see a good outcome from that. I'm still waiting for the first time when somebody sells and it's entirely a positive thing. My experience from watching from the sidelines so far is that there's been very much negative outcomes from all of that for everybody except the person who's selling. And so lots of M&A going on. The weight of regulation has been massively increasing, which I think discourages smaller companies, discourages startups. It's very, very hard to get directly regulated now. So the networks are doing pretty well. Fair enough. So, it's changing. It's funny though, like everything changes, but then everything stays the same probably, So lots of stuff going on. There's still far too few advisors. They reckon 9% of UK adults who could seek advice actually get it. And so, like everywhere in the world, we've got the rise of the financial influencer and people turning to ChatGPT and Claude and everything for their financial advice. So some challenges, but some opportunities as well.
With RDR, similar to in Australia, we saw a huge reduction in the number of advisors where it literally sort of more than halved overnight. Mm-hmm. There was a similar experience, I think, in the UK. And have you seen advisors coming back into the market, or is it just anemic as far as that growth and it's really only offsetting those leaving?
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's been any major offset of those that left. Mm. Obviously, if you were of a certain age and you'd made enough money, that was kind of your cue to call it a day. So I had two colleagues that applied to. Really, they were never going to get the higher exams. One of them actually kind of did it on principle because he didn't want to be kicked out of the industry. So, the year before RDR came in, he did hardly any actual work. He just studied and got his exams just so that he wasn't kicked out. So he could sort of leave on his own terms. And then he left a year later. So it seemed like a lot of effort for nothing to me. So, tons of people of a certain age, or of a complete lack of disposition to do exams, they just left. The banks laid off advisors in the tens of thousands. There was a point where there were 300,000 people in the UK who called themselves financial advisors. That was a pretty broad church, right? That could be anything from mortgage to general insurance or whatever. But it's now about 35,000, so it's a lot more than halved. And there are still far too few young entrants. There's still probably more people retiring than are joining. So we got a real PR problem, I think, as a profession, and we need to sort of do what we can to fix that and make it attractive. And there's some good stuff going on, but it's very small scale at this point. So yeah, it was a big deal. I mean, it's cataclysmic, really. And we haven't recovered, if we're talking about advisor numbers being a measure of kind of health. I think 300,000 was way too many for a population of 65 million. But it'd be good if there was 100,000 advisors in the UK, I think.
So probably been fantastic for your business because these clients have to go somewhere. But what's the general approach to what we call over here the advice gap, where you've got far too many Australians needing advice and far few advisors to give it? Is it technology? How are people trying to solve for it?
Yeah, I mean, the industry, there's some sort of good stuff, like what were originally termed robo-advisors here, which of course are nothing of the sort. They're basically guided investment platforms. Yeah, risk profile, here's a portfolio that matches, send us your money sort of thing. There's no real advice going on there. There is a move by the FCA to bring in something called, the name just popped out of my head. I think it's something like simplified guidance or something like that. It will come back to me. And it's a kind of, they've somewhat loosened the sort of compliance necessities for certain cases. So they are basically allowing providers, primarily, this is going to be the banks that will be all over this, to say, well, okay, somebody of this broad demographic, age, family status, job, income status, things like that, this product would broadly apply to that broad demographic, and they're going to be able to sell that product to that broad demographic with a much reduced sort of compliance burden. This very early stages, it's not really kicked in yet. So I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. We'll see whether that turns out to be a good thing or not. But something's got to be done to bridge the advice gap, because at the minute it's mostly being filled by social media, I think. I'm sure the AI models will gradually take over, or at least massively increase their share of online questions about financial planning. And of course, they'll get increasingly better at it. You and I both know machines will never be able to empathize or pick up subconscious non-verbal cues in the way that a very good experienced financial planner can. So I'm not even remotely scared that AI is going to take my job, but I think AI hopefully will do great work in improving the general financial health of people, as long as it's trained properly and the prompts are right. I'm very positive about AI, and I think that's going to be the thing that will make the difference, because there just aren't enough advisors coming in.
Is there a rule of thumb in the UK as far as the sort of average number of customers that one advisor can service?
Yeah, I mean, everybody puts out the sort of 150 number. I can't remember the guy's name who came up with that. But there's the
size of the village before.
Yeah, that there's studies and stuff. So everybody says about 150. Our guys at Jackson's, we kind of use that as a rule of thumb. I noticed Michael Kitsis came out. They put something out on LinkedIn yesterday about something like the best advisors can only handle 50 clients. I would massively dispute that with the help of technology and a great team. So, as ever, general comments are good for clicks and engagement, but there's always far too much nuance, really, or there should be more nuance. So, yeah, I would say we generally work to 150, but with great support, power planning, client relationship management help as well. So the advisor is the sort of linchpin of the relationship, but they get a lot of help with it, and we're fortunate in that we're a big enough team so that the advisors can go on holiday and not have to check their email, right?
But one of the interesting concepts that the team brought back was this idea of academies. I believe there's a number of academies that have sort of grown in the UK where their primary objective is to sort of find the next generation of financial advisors, and that those academies are often funded by the large advice firms. Is that accurate?
That's exactly right. So it tends to be the big wealth management firms. So your Rathbones, your M&G, St. James's Place, those are the big sort of players. My fear with those, I mean, purely in the abstract, I think probably the training will be great because these guys have got scale. I mean, these are, St. James's Place, I think last count was a FTSE 100 company, or it's certainly close. So it's massive, massive company, one of the, biggest companies in the UK. So they've got the scale and the clout to be able to do that really, really well. I mean, I was trained by my first employer, the insurance company, with the Co-op insurance company as at hand. And, the training was brilliant. Proper residential courses by really good trainers, flew through the admittedly quite basic exams at the time because the training was brilliant. And I'm sure that is the case in the academies. My one big fear is that it's a bit of a sausage machine, and I have a real issue with some of the business models of those big companies where they are kind of saddling advisors with massive debt. Makes it very difficult to leave. The contracts can be quite punitive. And I just worry that a naive new entrant will get great training and end up paying for it and regretting it for the first 15 years potentially of their career. So some would argue it's better than nothing. The cost of training. So it's hard for a smaller business to do it. So yeah, I think it's the jury's out again. They're relatively new, these academies. I'm a little bit skeptical. I really try not to be skeptical. Do you know what I mean? I'm a kind of eternal optimist. I want to kind of think the best of people, but I just worry about the business model and how it might trap young advisors. So I think there needs to be a better way. There is some good stuff, like Coventry University is, I think, the only university in the country that does a proper financial planning degree, and the students come out with diploma level qualifications, so they could come out and advise legally. I mean, they'd know the theory, but wouldn't know anything about dealing with actual clients. But that's good.
So trade off between the technical and the soft skills.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, I both know which of those is more important, right? But it's a great start, and it's an accessible way to get young people in. But it's we're talking sort of 10 or 15 students at a time, so it's not going to make a dent, but it's a brilliant start, and we need to encourage that.
Conscious there's a whole heap of stuff I'd like to cover and pick your brain on. Just the last comment. So sort of moving forward from a regulatory perspective, is there anything that excites you about the direction at the moment over the next 3 to 5 years? Because presumably the pendulum swung very heavily one way and now it's starting to settle back.
Yeah, I mean, from a reg perspective, I'm not sure. It's hard to get excited about reg.
It's hard to get excited. Yeah, let me reframe that. Is there something of interest that's going to...
For me, I think with the rise of the machines, I am excited and always have been about the future of really good, what we often call full fat financial planning here. Really deep dive, emotionally intelligent, understanding the client on a deep level, and then smart, intelligent, complex, detailed, holistic financial planning. I can't imagine a future yet where a human faced with arguably the biggest financial transition of their life, that should we retire? Can we retire? I can't imagine any scenario where somebody's going to have that conversation with a bot. And that makes me pleased, obviously, because it means I'll have a job, and so will my colleagues for a while yet. And I think the other things that are happening will shine a real light on financial planning done right. I mean, we're already sort of 2 or 3 times oversubscribed, and so we're trying to grow into that. And I think that bodes very well.
Let's switch gears now. You mentioned finfluencers a couple of times.
It's a terrible word. It's hard to say.
Terrible. And yet in some ways you were the original back in 2010 online, talking about, no doubt, financial planning and financial planning issues. What I want to know is, why you decided to go down that path, but also how have you managed to attract the complex, difficult clients that you have through that channel? What makes a difference?
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I'd love to say, Matt, that I know what I'm doing, right? But I basically just kind of doggedly carried on doing something which seemed to be working and learning as I go. So you asked why I started doing it. I mean, I tend to say that 3 things came together at the right time, which were the trigger. So one was that in various areas of my life, people told me I was good at explaining things. So at work, my kids, around the dinner table, they were young children then. I was a governor in their primary school. I was a lay preacher at church. So people in these various spheres, people would just say, you really came across well, or you explained that really clearly. And that kind of sunk in. And my dad was a teacher as well as a minister, church minister. So I guess the teaching DNA maybe is in there. My brother also teaches. And then I had a kind of realization that I wanted to do a little bit more than just help rich people get richer. I don't have any issue with that, no kind of moral angst over it, but I wanted to do a little bit more. I kind of wanted to scale to some degree, and that kind of percolated. It's like, is there something that I could do here to reach more people aware of the advice gap? The RDR was in law, but hadn't come into force in 2010. It came into force at the end of 2012. That was the second thing. And then the third thing was that I read a book called Crush It by one of my online heroes, Gary Vaynerchuk. So he was a very early adopter of YouTube and video, just to talk about his thing, which for him in those days was wine, because he took his dad's wine shop in New York from 4 million a year to 60 million a year, basically by going online on video every single day and tasting 3 wines. Of course, his big personality, New Jersey, doesn't talk like most wine people, attracted a following, business went nuts. And the premise of his book was, look, there are no gatekeepers now. There's no kind of directors or producers telling you that you haven't got the right face or the right voice or you're too fat or whatever. And just if the message is good and if you put it out there consistently, people will show up. And therefore, what an opportunity to teach and to market. So I thought I'd have a go. Literally, those 3 things kind of coalesced. I bought a flip camera, which is now on a shelf over the other side of the room as a kind of trophy, and started talking to it. And I just said, I'm going to explain how money works, because I think we got a problem coming down the line where more and more people will be disenfranchised from good advice. So I'm going to teach you how money works so that you can do this yourself. And essentially, I built a career on telling people that they don't need to see a financial planner, that they can do it themselves if they've got kind of the wit, the time, and the energy. So that's why it started, man. And I'm still going. And I'm sort of, 10 million views on YouTube later, nearly 9 million podcast downloads, hundreds of thousands of people a month consuming the stuff. And and have built a business off the back of it. Honestly, we've sort of more than quintupled the size of the business in the last 7 years.
That's an incredible audience and growth over that period. How long are the typical podcasts and how frequently are you doing them?
So we're very careful, and it's quite important to whatever platform you're on to create content native to that platform. So for example, I have a YouTube channel. Those are textbook YouTube videos. So between 8 and 13, 14 minutes long, single subject, mostly a piece to camera like I'm sort of doing with you now, with graphics occasionally explaining things. So that's kind of one form of content. The podcast, which is also now videoed, by the way, just to confuse things, is usually around 40 minutes long. Mostly is I have a co-host, my now retired colleague from Jackson's and best mate in the world, Roger Weeks. He co-hosts with me and we sort of chat and answer questions. And also sometimes we'll deal with a single subject in depth, sometimes even over a couple of episodes. A lot of time it's just Q&A. We'll answer half a dozen questions and we've got a massive backlog to work through. But that's on a different YouTube channel. And of course, that is also released audio only, like all podcasts. So different kind of content for different platforms is really important. But it's funny. My audience now looks like me. I've been doing it 16 years. I was 35 when I started, right? Nice, not a gray hair on my head and, a couple of stone lighter than I am now. And now the audience looks like me, gray haired. Retirement is hovering into view on the horizon. And so Meaningful Money has become a more of a retirement focused kind of project. And so I wanted to backfill for the younger folks. And so, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, I started a new podcast called Bank of Dad with my youngest daughter, Kate. So she hosts it. And I'm basically, the premise is that I'm teaching her in front of a camera. She knows a lot about finance already, but she's asking the questions that her peers are. And so we have an episode dealing with like credit cards or what does your pay slip mean that you get every month? Just to try and teach younger adults the basics and to get them on the right path, really. So for me, it's about helping as many people as we can and go figure, you build a career telling people they don't need advice and yet we're busier than ever. That's just how the internet works.
Imagine a world where wealth technology is simplified. NetWealth is continually investing in new tools and platform features to optimize your staff productivity and to give you and your clients the best user experience. With our managed accounts functionality, bring new efficiency and scale to your investment operations. A world of technology awaits. Discover it at netwealth.com.au/woo.
And so on that, we've seen a couple of local businesses, obviously media commentators, newspapers, and increasingly online and digital. Part of the challenge that they had was that you build a huge audience, potentially you generate a huge number of leads, but you've got to be very careful and strict around the lead processing and who are the right clients to actually see.
Yes.
How do you manage that process? Are you pre-qualifying them on the website? How do they find you and how do you make sure that they fit your ideal client type?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Matt. And it's like part of it, I think it starts with the content itself. So if your content is basically holding nothing back. So yeah, literally I've gone deep into some pretty technical subjects and hopefully in a way that enables people to not only grasp them, but can say, how can I apply this for my individual situation? If you go deep, you're probably going to cut out the real sort of simple stuff where people are just like, well, I can easily do that. I don't need to see an advisor to open a pension, right? Or an ISA, tax-free investment vehicle. We don't get those. We don't get people saying, I've got 20 grand worth of credit card. Can you help me, credit card debt? Can you help me get out of it? We don't get any of that. So I'd love to say that was intentional, Matt, but that's basically happened by accident, by just giving all the content that I would give live with a client in front of me, not holding anything back. What we get is the kind of clients that both need us and we like to work with. For us, the qualification, I'll explain how we do it in a minute. For us, we are more likely to say no to somebody because we'll say, you can do it yourself. I'm not going to charge you $5,000 to rubber stamp what you've already done a really good job on. Because we have finite resources, we have a finite amount of value that we can add. And I would rather help the family over here with young adult children, but with, special needs, autism or whatever. And so we're planning for the long-term care of that child than the perfectly wealthy person who's already got everything brilliantly organized, low-cost funds and everything. And they just want a professional to say, well done. We're not going to spend time doing that. right? And so when somebody gets in touch, so, there are videos on our Jackson's website. So people might watch the Meaningful Money content, 2 separate companies, 2 separate brands, by the way, might come back to that. And they watch the content and there's a page on the site that says Work with Pete. And that essentially links to the Jackson's website because now we're in a regulated world, right? And there's a video and there's a form for them to complete. They complete that form and it comes in and they get invited to book in and they get a video before they book in. So there's consistency because it's me and my face and my voice, telling them what to expect. All right. And some people, they don't either don't book in or they cancel because they realize actually it's not for them. Fees are on the website, fully disclosed right up front. So that kind of gets rid of any tire kickers. Or somebody, we very occasionally get somebody say, can you do a discount on that? To which the answer is an emphatic no. Why would I do that when I've got 3 times as many people want to work with me as we can cope with? And so with the qualification happens. And even then, when we have an initial call, which is very structured, it's about, can we help? How can we help? Do we want to help? But it's in order to understand that, we need to know a lot about the client situation. So we ask very structured questions. I do it. My practice manager does them. And we kick out maybe 1 in 3, something like that. Maybe 1 in 2. Something. So we're pretty good at thinning out, and then we've got better at it, I have to say, because my gut feeling is to help everybody. But we nearly burned out last year because of that. So we've got a lot better about being a bit more careful about who we take on.
Given that your reach is national and very broad, what's your typical service delivery? Is it all virtual? Do you have people coming into the office, or is it a bit of a hybrid?
Yeah, both. I mean, Jackson's has been in business since 1974, so we've got a big local client base as well, but most of our new business doesn't come from Cornwall now. About 10% does. So we got a lovely office right on the harbour front, so people can come in. It's amazing, actually, because Cornwall is a holiday venue. People say, actually, I'm going to come down for a week and I'll see you while I'm down. I'm going to come down on holiday. So that's cool. But the vast majority of it is virtual only. And I remember the first client that came from Meaningful Money, they were in Bexhill-on-Sea, which is about 350 miles from here. And I said, okay, right, let's set up do you do Skype? Remember Skype? Right? And so we did Skype. And then it's funny because like 9 years later, we're in lockdown, and the industry presser over here is doing here are 10 tips to do better client Zoom meetings. Well, by then I'd been doing it for a decade, And so it's things like eyeballing the camera and all that sort of stuff. It goes a long way. And so most of it's virtual. We have booths, which are soundproofed and ventilated. So, it doesn't take up the space of a whole office. We have meeting rooms as well. And we have really, really fast internet. I've trained the guys, to speak to the camera, but drop their eyes occasionally and just check client responses. So when you say something that you think might get a response, just drop your eyes so that you can see, it's like, oh, how did that land? And it's obviously, it's like 95% as good as being in the room with somebody, but it's not quite as good as being in the room with somebody.
Taking soft skills to another level.
Yeah, man. It's the way it's got to be done.
Given that your daughter's now involved, so is she planning in your business and looking after younger clients, or it's just a bit of a fashion project for it?
No, and she's marketing and comms. Honestly, I agonized over making her a Nepo baby. But she's a phenomenal communicator, and essentially she's helping me scale what we do, both here at Meaningful Money and sort of what we call internal comms, i.e. to clients at Jackson's. So, we're working on a library of content essentially for clients only. So, yeah. So she's helping me with that. Ultimately, my practice manager is just like, look, I need you to do more video. I need you to do this, that. And I'm like, cool. If you can find an extra day a week, then let's do that. But actually what I needed was help. Find an extra day a week, then let's do that. But actually what I needed was help. And so that's what Kate is doing. And the Bank of Dad thing is part of that. Because even though probably the target audience for that show isn't the sort of clients that we want to attract, that's kind of secondary. What we want to do is help people primarily, which sounds a bit nauseatingly altruistic, but that is the primary motivation. So it's worth doing for that reason alone. And we have fun.
given that you mentioned a lot of your customers now look a lot like you, you actually look quite young from where I'm sitting. How are you thinking about intergenerational planning?
I mean, it's kind of intrinsic to what we do. When I kind of explain the sort of at-retirement planning process to prospective clients and to clients, it's fairly simple. It's like, right, what's coming in? What income have you got coming in? What are your expected outflows, both regular and ad hoc, as far as we can see those things? First question is, have you got enough? Do you have enough? Are you going to be okay? Question mark. The answer is a simple yes or no, or probably. And once we've established they're going to be okay, then we're in the realms of optimization and nuance. And that's where we really add the value, right? So we spend our lives balancing broadly three things. Lifetime tax. So, and short and long-term tax. Sometimes we might incur more tax in the short term to incur less later on. Bit of a gamble. We don't know how long they're going to live. So income and tax, balancing that across their life is the first thing we have to kind of optimize for. Legacy, huge part of it. We generally deal with wealthy clients. They don't want to ruin their kids, but they do want to help them. And so that's and obviously they don't want to pay unnecessary inheritance tax when they die. And then the third thing is we generally call it diversification, by which we mean sources or places from which they can draw money. So business, have they got rental property? Have they got, pension pots, non-pension pots, tax-free, non-pension pots? They've got different sources so that we can, help them optimize where they draw from on a year-by-year basis. So income and taxation, legacy, diversification of withdrawal sources. Those three things are what we need to balance. And I can have two people with identical financial situations, but their output would be different because they have different priorities. So I recently recommended a client who was 65 that we did a plan and said, look, between 65 and 90, we are going to incur you an extra £500,000 worth of income tax. But in so doing, we will save you 2 million quid of inheritance tax. And that was their priority. So it's weird for an advisor to say, hey, you need to pay more tax now. But of course, the benefit for them was what was most important for them, which was legacy. So, that's for us, multi-generational legacy planning is a core part of the sort of retirement planning piece. It comes more into focus later on, obviously, but we are nudging clients earlier than they might consider it themselves. So, there's lots of stats about, the first generation makes it, second generation kind of holds it, and the third generation blows it. And I'm not sure how true that is. It's like all sort of rules of thumb, but we just want to help people give with warm hands and equip their kids, as best they can and keep as much money in the family. So it's fun, technical, but fun.
Switching gears, there's a couple of things before we go that I just wanted to get a bit more information on. The first was you mentioned a couple of different brands, so the difference between Meaningful Money and Jackson's, and moving from what it sounded like an unregulated to a regulated environment and just how you manage that. And then maybe just as an extension, before we move on to the last topic, just any thoughts, advice for people or advisors in Australia thinking about maybe starting up their own podcast or video channel?
Yeah. So again, mobile accent and design, I chose not to go for a personal brand, right? So it's Meaningful Money. It's not, Pete Matthew Talks Money or whatever. So that has kind of served me well. I've never ever had any issues. I've had compliance people crawl all over my work and they've never found anything of concern. I think it's quite easy to stay the right side of the rules. So, if you've got these unregulated, unqualified finfluencers, pimping, contracts for difference, trading apps, and all that sort of stuff, crypto schemes. That's practically fraud, right? That stuff just needs shutting down. But if a qualified advisor says in a non-regulated environment, this is a pension, this is an ISA, these are the differences, and these are why you might consider one over the other. As long as I'm not saying, hey, and Vanguard have got a brilliant new fund, you should check it out, then I've crossed the line, right? And so for me, it's easy to stay the right side of the line. And how we kind of demarcate it, there's lots of discussion and planning going on about how we bring them closer together. But I think having a non-regulated brand and company and a regulated one makes life a little easier. What we are really clear about is when somebody gets in touch about potentially working with us at Jackson's, we obviously go through the full disclosure process. And I literally say, you've read the books, you've watched the videos. That's all just general info. You work with us here. You've got all the weight of protection as a consumer of financial services and regulation. So let me explain how that works. This is a different relationship now. And they're like, yeah, totally understand that. And so it's easy for us to keep the two separate. And I think it's easy to stay the right side of the line. For anybody listening or watching to this that's thinking about doing a podcast, do it and don't think twice, but commit, because it's hard work. First thing you should do is write down. I generally say to people to start with the questions that they get asked by clients, right? Because if you're working with clients, you're getting asked the same questions all the time. Answer them, whether in podcast, written form, or on a piece to camera video. You don't need fancy kit. You can build that up over time. My first camera was £100. The cameras I use 3 now, and they're 20,000 quid between them. So it's like, you don't need 20 grand worth of cameras, but I like kit, and the podcast looks great as a result. So, you don't need kit, but all you need is content. So write down 50. If you can't write down 50 subjects, I don't think you'll make it. But as you're writing, you'll think, oh, right, there's a subset there. There's another episode there potentially. And then just start answering them. Read a book called Endless Customers by Marcus Sheridan. It's a follow-up to a brilliant book of his that I used to recommend called They Ask You Answer. Now I recommend his new one, Endless Customers. Just answer the questions, because people will find you because they're asking those questions of YouTube and ChatGPT and all that. And they will find you. And then once they've consumed your stuff for a bit, they've subscribed and they're used to hearing your voice and your face, they're not going to go anywhere else, honestly. It's funny, I spoke to a guy this week who, there's obviously quite a bunch of financial YouTubers now, and some of them are regulated. They still advise clients. And, I had a guy say, well, I've spoken to James Shack and I've spoken to somebody else, can't remember. And now I'm speaking to you. It's like, cool. So I guess as more people do it, there'll potentially be more competition. But I've always said that somebody else could take my exact words and deliver them to camera, and it would resonate with a different set of people because they are them and I'm me. I doubtless turn some people off. I'm always getting shouted at for waving my hands around when I talk. So the YouTube comments, somebody said, you should plug this guy into the national grid. Generating electricity with my hands. So I'm going to turn some people off, but the same words delivered by somebody else will attract somebody else. So I just think the more the merrier. The more good information we put out there, the better. Just do it. Don't hold anything back. Give it all away for free and let the universe look after you. But be consistent, for God's sake. Most podcasts don't make it past 3 episodes. It's something daft like only some 2 in 10 make it past 3 episodes, and only 10 in 100 make it past 10 episodes. It's just like crazy numbers. You've got to be consistent. You've got to commit for a year and learn the craft, obviously.
I can't think of a much better place to call it wraps on this conversation.
Sure you don't want to talk about 4-day week?
Okay, you want to talk about 4-day weeks. Let's go out on a high. 4-day weeks are controversial here and everywhere around the world. Tell us all about yours, and is it working?
Yes, I read some books while I was on holiday. I came back and said to the team, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you reckon? Unsurprisingly, they went, hell yeah. Right? And so I said, okay, clearly I'm not going to accept a 20% reduction in revenue or profit. We need to do 5 days work in 4, but I'm not going to extend your hours. I could have done. I could have said, you do 35 hours over 4 days instead of over 5 days, work longer days. I said, I'm not going to do that because all the studies show if you give your team a day a week, they will meet the challenge. So we eased in over 6 months. For 2 months, we closed at 3:00 on a Friday because everybody wants a Friday off, right? People are saying do we do some people Monday off, some people Tuesday? Everybody wants a Friday off. So we literally closed the office on a Friday. We rota one person on the team on to cover. Got a decent sized team, so I only have to do that about once every 5 months, something like that. And they get a day off in lieu. And we've done it now for 2 years. And since we've done that, we've doubled revenue and profit. Now, I'm not saying we've done it because of a 4-day week. That would be madness, but it hasn't held us back. Probably I could have 2.5 times revenue and profit if we'd have done a 5-day week. What's the point in that? Honestly, well-being goes through the roof.
I'm glad you qualified. Glad you qualified at the start, though, that it's actually 5 days of work done in 4, not that it's just a day off. And I think that's often, that nuance is missed often. That's incredible results. And presumably the team is getting bigger and getting great talent.
It's not hard to recruit or retain, shall we put it that way?
And work from home, is that 4 days in the office?
Yeah, it depends. We got a couple of fully remote just because that's the way it's kind of turned out. But mostly we have folks 2 in, 2 out. But to suit them, if they're, their needs change for whatever reason, as long as the work gets done, I think we need to treat people like adults until they don't deserve to be. And it's fairly easy enough to keep an eye on. Funny, the team will call out anybody who's dragging their feet. And they'll make it very clear that that's not all right. We've got a great team, great leadership team within it who lead by example. So we're lucky, but we like to think that we've led that correctly. And for us, honestly, man, it's a godsend. I mean, I own the business, so sometimes Friday's a catch-up day for me. But the team, it's a 4-day week, and we work like dogs in those 4 days. If you got an extra day on the weekend to recover, it's okay.
That was actually going to be my next question, which is, what were you doing for the day before that you don't do now? Is it the chats around the water cooler? What have you given up?
Yeah, I mean, we have occasionally had to say, because sometimes a conversation starts, right? And then more heads turn. And before you know it, there's like 8 people having a conversation about like the World Cup or something. And occasionally we just have to say, look, come on, guys, this is lunchtime stuff. Again, treat people like adults. So if it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes, then fine. If it's 25 minutes, we've got a problem. But again, it's funny, that happened fairly recently. And some of the others who were not involved with that conversation essentially grasped them up. They're like, come on, that's not all right. Come on, guys. And called them out on it. And they're like, yeah, fair cop. It's easy to get caught up in it. And it's definitely the case that the better you treat people, sometimes the better they want to be treated, or they can sort of take the mick a little bit. But usually if you call them out on that, they go, fair enough. They know how lucky they are, put it that way.
Often it's those little conversations and the chats in the coffee room, though, that create culture. And have you seen a change in culture off the back of the change to 4 days?
Yeah, it's part of a cultural change. When I've called her my practice manager a couple of times recently. Her actual title is Empowerment and Impact Lead. Her name is Sharon. She joined us 4.5 years ago, and she has transformed the place because she is my integrator. She gets stuff done. I might have the ideas. She will be like, yeah, let's do it, but here's how we're going to make it work. And so, I mean, I'm a lucky man, right? Because I found her. And I obviously look after her and treat her very well and pay her well. But she is as excited as I am about the building of something great and something that we are proud of, as opposed to building for financial reasons alone. So she is the one that has helped shape the culture. And it's very much, look, this is what we're trying to do. Are you with us? Come with us. These are the kind of behaviors we expect somebody who works for us to exhibit. Anything else we will stamp on. And we're not pushovers, right? We'll stamp on it very quickly, but we treat people like adults. I learned that from some good bosses early on, and I think we've been able to deliver it. So the 4-day week is just kind of part of that. But we, go out and drink together. We socialize. We're very good at involving the team in what our plans are, any struggles we're experiencing or whatever. So it's a little bit touchy-feely for a lot of people, but I think it's working very well for us.
Wonderful. I'm glad we chatted about that. But
I'm sorry, I dropped that on you.
No, not at all. No, I'm glad you did. But Pete, it's been an absolute pleasure. Hope to catch up with you in the UK, or if you make it over to Australia at some point. And look forward to watching a few of your online YouTube vids.
Thank you, mate. I really have enjoyed chatting with you, Matt, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Between Meetings. For more episodes and to subscribe to our series, visit the NetWealth website, iTunes, Spotify, or your favourite listening service. And if you want to contact me or engage or discuss any of the topics raised, please find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, or send me a private message. We hope you can tune into the next episode.